first barrier that we've got to get through, if we want to become worshipers, if we want to become grace-centered worshipers, the first barrier we're going to try to break down is this: you're drinking from the wrong well. You've been drinking from the wrong well. She's got her religion already, right? She knows who their forefathers are. She knows who God is. What she doesn't know is who Jesus is, right? And so she's drinking from this well, going through her motions, thinking she's doing a great job at being this good, holy person. But the reality is she needed Jesus. Jesus was the well she needed. And so some of us in the room, right, we're drinking from the wrong well. This can be Christian or not Christian. You can be a Christian, and you've got that eternal life within you, that living water that's been given to you, but you keep going to the other well, right? As if the living water wasn't enough for you, you go chasing after the other wells in the area, right? This whole time, she was drinking from the wrong well. We can drink from the well of success, right? I know I'm saved. I know Jesus loves me, but man, if I don't achieve this, I'll feel like a failure. We can drink from the well of money, right? If I just get more money, I will be happy then. I know Jesus has got me, but man, I want to experience the joys of this earth. Respect, drink from that well. Being a good parent, drinking from that well, right? The problem is you drink from all of these different wells, seeking out joy, and it's leaving you empty. Because just like the woman is going to find out here, she can keep coming back to that well, but she'll keep coming back to that well. There will always be a need for more, always be a need for more. It can never satisfy. And so Jesus says, hey, come drink from the well that always satisfies. Come drink from the well. The problem is we don't always believe that his well is the best well, right? And sometimes that's our own fault. Sometimes the well we drink from is sin itself and disobedience that leads to death, right? So notice what Jesus does here. Here's the second barrier we got to get rid of: unrepentant and unconfessed sin, right? You cannot pursue sin and then ask yourself, what's God doing all the time? Why isn't he near? Why isn't he this, right? He's always near, right? You have that living water within you. It is welling up inside. It should be overflowing in the way we live, the worship that we do. But in your mind, that sin has corrupted that picture of who God is. And you chase after that sin, that other well, if you will, right? You chase after that continuously and constantly. And you ever notice how empty you feel when you catch up to that sin? You ever notice how sometimes you go through that and you find pleasure in the moment, right? I tell teenagers all the time, sin is fun. Because if it wasn't, you wouldn't do it, right? There's something about sin that you desire, something about it that you find joy and pleasure in because you keep going back. But you know, as well as I do, Christian or not, man, you know that when you pursue these things, they leave you empty. They leave you feeling pain and heartache and loss. And just like humans do, we return, hoping that something comes up that's different. But the reality is, it always leaves us empty because there is only one who can satisfy. So she asked Jesus, we're going to go back to John chapter 4. She says, give me this water. I don't want to have to come here. And Jesus looks at her and says, go and get your husband, he told her. And she said, I don't have a husband, the woman replied. And Jesus said, you're right. You don't have a husband, for you've had 5 husbands. And you aren't even married to the man you're living with now. You certainly spoke the truth. Notice her response. She says, sir, the woman said, you must be a prophet. Notice how Jesus isn't just going to let her get away with the sin that's in her life. He calls it out. He draws it out of her, right? In a way that he's going to prove to her that he is who he says he is. He tells her things about herself that nobody should have known except for maybe the town. Maybe that's why she's out at the well, right? Because all the town knows she's had 5 husbands, and now she's living with the 6th one who's not her husband. So she's being shunned by the entire community. But this outsider comes in, and he knows her life. Now, the reason why I love this, the reason why John chapter 4 stands out to me is because nowhere in that sentence did he say, and you will be condemned to death if you don't change. Nowhere in there does he say, you dirty, filthy woman, how dare you pursue these things? Because Jesus is speaking to compassion. And if we as Christians are going to worship in a community and with our lives, we have to see people with compassion, even in their sins. He just mentions, hey, I know that you're living in a form of brokenness. Right? He draws it. Why? Because for her, this was her life, right? This was everything. She's got to live, right? And then back in that society there, if you didn't have a husband, what property do you own, right? How do you take care of yourself? And so who knows? And one of the things that the Chosen clip does is it makes this kind of real for us. It's not in there. It's not the Bible. But who knows why she's had 5 different husbands? You might have just assumed right off the bat why she had 5 different husbands. Was she a prostitute? Did she sleep around? Right? What if her husbands were abusers? What if that's why she moved from one to another? What if her husbands left her? They didn't think she was pretty enough or good enough, right? But we instantly throw our bias into sinful people's lives as though their sin is more dirty than yours. Why? Because apparently that's the way we're wired. Why? Jesus didn't wire us like that. He wired us to see people with compassion. But understand this, if you keep pursuing sin, that is a form of worship. Worship is just literally a desire and a pursuit of something beyond you. We all worship everything. I mean, I can prove it to you, right? It's August, which means football season's starting, right? And think of it this way. You got your tickets to the game, right? You spent a lot of money, got your good seats. Game day, what do? Throw on your favorite jersey, support your favorite player, right? You show up at the game early. You want to hang out with the people who are next to you. You want to make sure you get your good seat. Make sure you get your popcorn ready, right? The game starts. You stand up. You cheer. Hey, here we go. Yes, this is amazing. This is awesome, right? In between breaks there, the song starts playing, and you start going, yeah, okay. All right, I like this song. I haven't heard this one in forever. You start dancing, right? Your favorite player gets up. The team scores. We all yell, this is amazing, right? We're going to drown out the haters because our team is winning. I can translate that to directly what church should be like on Sunday morning, can I not? We gather, we identify with our team, we sing, we slap hands. It's good to see you today. Right? Worship, that's all it is. Worship is literally just giving yourself over to something. The problem is that we're trying to redefine what sin looks like. Right? We're trying to say that this isn't sin because I enjoy it, or I want this and so it can't be bad. For this woman, I don't know the reason for 5 different husbands than the one she's living with, but I know in that society, this is a form of protection for her. And so maybe she had to lower her standards. Maybe she had to turn towards something else just so she could figure out how to live. And Jesus is saying, listen, this earth is not your home. You drink from my well, I'll give you the living water, and it will get you to the real home. And so how does he ask her to do that? He asks her to course correct, right? He doesn't just say, it's fine. I mean, just keep going, right? He just literally says, I know you, and I know you've had 5 different husbands. I know the one you're living with right now puts you in a state of sin. I mean, that's what he's saying here. And her response is one of shock, really. He's like, you must be a prophet. She's getting closer, right? She still doesn't know who he is, but she's getting closer. She knows there's a God. She knows that prophets came, and prophets would always deliver these messages of kind of a judgment or calling out people in their sins. So she's so close. She's so close. But the barrier of unrepentant and unconfessed sin will always keep us from being able to worship freely. True life worship directly involves being in agreement with God in what he says is good. That his path for you is good. That he is good. It's order out of chaos. Essentially, what he is telling her right now is you've had 6 different men that you've lived with. That is chaos. I'm inviting you back into order because there is peace and order. Right? Any sexual sin, I mean, honestly, this is the way it works. Any sexual sin outside of the confines of man and woman in marriage is out of order because that's the order that God designed. So anything outside of that invites chaos. right? That's why we fight against it. We don't do a very good job fighting against it sometimes, right? Sometimes we get to be the over-oppressive person. No, you and your filthy, dirty sins, how dare you? Right? But we're supposed to fight against that because this chaos that you create in your life will never allow you to see the peace of God living within you. Right? This chaos that you're just inviting in, you're just saying, it's fine, it's fine. You know, everybody gets to live their life. You love who you want to love. Sure. In the moment, maybe that is the way to go. Maybe that is the best that you think there is for you. But Jesus says, come drink from the living well, and I'll show you what's better. And what's better is order, not chaos. Come back into order, not chaos. Which brings us into our third barrier of worship. You can't worship what you don't know. You can't worship what you don't know, right? And so it goes on, verse 20. So tell me, why is it that you Jews insist that Jerusalem is the only place of worship, while we Samaritans claim it's here at Mount Gerizim where our ancestors worship? Essentially what she's saying is, you guys won't let us go to Jerusalem, right? But you guys keep telling us that's the only place that we can worship. So how do you expect us to know who God is if you won't invite us in? We can translate that to today too, can't we? How can we expect people to fully know who God is if we're not inviting them in? We're not asking them to come be a part of us. And so she throws that out there. And Jesus replied in verse 21, believe me, dear woman, the time is coming when it will no longer matter whether you worship the Father on this mountain or in Jerusalem. You Samaritans know very little about the one you worship, while we Jews know all about him. For salvation comes through the Jews. But the time is coming. Indeed, it is here now when true worshipers will worship the Father in spirit and in truth. The Father is looking for those who will worship him that way. For God is spirit, so those who worship him must worship in spirit and in truth. So he tears down this broken religion. And he says, listen, what I'm here to tell you today is that it no longer matters if you make it to the temple or you go to Mount Gerizim. It no longer matters if you'll be in your room or if you'll be in the crowd, right? What he's saying is none of that matters. It is gone. What matters is spirit and truth. What matters is spirit and truth. He says the time is coming and is now here when those who worship will worship the Father in spirit and in truth. This idea of spirit means you're connected to God, right? God is spirit. You're connected by the Holy Spirit. You have to be able to have that spirit in order to worship God the way it needs to be, right? I always say that an unbeliever, a non-Christian, whatever you want to call him, doesn't wake up one morning and just go, I think today's the day I give God a try. If that's you and you wake up and you say, today's the day I want to give God a try, it's because he's been calling you. That spirit's been working. It's been punching you in the arm. Hey, over here. Hey, right? Just over and over and over, trying to get your attention. Right? He's been calling you because that's the Spirit. You have to have the Spirit in order to be able to worship God fully, but you also have to have the truth. You have to know who he is. And now, the beautiful thing about the gospel, the good news of Christ is this. This is all he says you have to know. If you believe that Jesus died on the cross, took that wrath of God, that punishment, that he died, was buried 3 days, and rose again from the grave, you can be saved. How simple is that? He's like, listen, I am the most complicated being in the entire universe. You will never know God the way you want to know him fully, right? He is a mystery beyond mystery. There are things he probably won't even share with you about himself. You'll never know him fully, but not once did he say, figure me out, and then show up. He said, listen, all I need you to do is just take what information you know and ask yourself, is it true? Did Jesus die? Did he rise again from the grave? If you can start there, man, that well is yours. And he does that for us, right? He invites us in. But the interesting thing here, right, verse 25, the woman said, I know the Messiah is coming, the one who is called Christ. Right, the music begins to swell, right? The climax of the story is about to happen. Everybody in the theater is anticipating what happens next because we all know it's coming. But for her, she's like, I know he's coming. I know the Christ will come. I know he's going to come. And when he comes, he'll explain everything to us. Then Jesus told her, I am the Messiah. That phrase, I am, will take her back to the God of Jacob. Right, the God of Moses, the story she knows of her history. She knows that God called himself the I am. Right? So he uses that title here. He says, I am, to be like, listen, everything that you've just said is true. The God of Jacob, the well of Jacob, Joseph, all that's true, right? He talks about this idea of being a prophet, right? That's true. That's true. But listen, I am he, God, who is the Messiah, and I'm standing in front of you. Now, big picture. How cool is that? The God of the universe takes time out of his day to sit at a well with a woman who is lost and provide her the way to the truth. He could have been out bringing people back from the dead, healing the leper, having people walk. This woman's got no issues in her life that we know of other than she is far from God. And Jesus is not happy with that. He wants her close. And so he goes to her in the middle of the day, breaking cultural rules, breaking religious rules, right? Because nothing in that moment was more important to him than her. Because what this story does is it kicks into the gospel, the idea that he has come not just for the Jews, but for the Gentile. Right? This is amazing. The story is amazing. She had no clue who he was. He just went up, had a conversation. That's all we ever ask of you, right? That's all we ever ask of me. We just go start a conversation with somebody, see where it goes. Right? Maybe you get lucky that day and that person hits their knees and they're like, man, I knew I needed Jesus and I knew someone was going to come to me today. And you get to share that story in churches for years to come because that's how amazing it was. Or maybe you have the conversation and the person looks at you and you're like, you're a little bit crazy, but thanks for talking to me today. And they walk away from you. Doesn't matter. The conversation was important. That's all. And so he has this conversation with her, tears down these barriers. And finally, he reveals to her who he is truly. And so when he says, I am the Messiah, everything that they had already talked about, it's going to make sense for her. Of course the Messiah would know that I live with a person who's not my husband. Of course the Messiah would know that I've had 5 before him, right? Of course the Messiah would know about Jacob and his well. Of course the Messiah would know who I am as a Samaritan. And yet here he is in front of me today. I mean, how desperate would you be just to have Jesus show up in front of you today? Right? And he does this, and he records this in all of history so that we can see that we as worshipers have got to tear down the barriers that we have put in place that keep us from seeing God for who he is. You've all got one, I guarantee it, right? So I guess the question that we're going to end on here today is the question of what is grace-centered worship, right? And this is for you to ask, not for me to ask. This is for you to ask. What is grace-centered worship? Now, I've got some ideas, right? I believe it's an overflow of the Spirit and truth. You have the Spirit living with you, so therefore you want to overflow that into the world. You know that God is real, that Jesus died, rose again from the grave. You want to overflow that to the world. That's my definition. Might not be your working definition. That's fine. You figure yours out. But perhaps there are barriers that keep you from getting to him, barriers that you've constructed. Maybe just perhaps you've lost the wonder of who he is. Perhaps you aren't as near to God as you pretend to be. Ouch, right? Perhaps you've been lied to your entire life about who God is. Some barriers we put up, some barriers were put up for us. But Jesus kicks down the front door of all of those barriers and literally says, there's nothing standing in between you and me. Just come. Come to me, all you who are weary, and I will give you rest. Come to me, all you who are in chaos, and I will bring your life into order. That's grace-centered worship. Not that we feel elite about who we are, that God has rescued us, but that we recognize that we are not worthy of his rescue. And yet there he is at the well, just offering us life. And so when we gather together in corporate worship, that's what we're overflowing. Right? We're putting that out into the world. We're saying, here, I want you to know more about Jesus. Worship through song is beautiful. Number one command in the Bible is to sing. You should be doing it daily, not just here on Sundays, in your car, in your shower, bedroom, whatever. You should be singing because worship through song is beautiful. It's not the only way we worship, right? We get to give back to God the one thing that kind of originates from us, right? He saved us. He gave us the Spirit. Now you have the choice to celebrate, to worship, to sing. Sometimes you withhold that because you don't think he's good. Sometimes you pour it out because you felt that he was good. But that's yours, right? There's a compelling in us all to worship something. What are you worshiping, and does it actually help? And I'm going to close with this, right? The story of the woman at the well. It's interesting. The disciples come back, and they're like, you need some food? Right? They're curious if Jesus is hungry. And all this stuff has happened before they get there, right? And if you skip down in John chapter 4, down in verse 39, you see the end of the story. It says, many Samaritans from the village believed in Jesus because the woman had said, he told me everything that I did, right? In my head, Devin's translation of the Bible, what that really says is, he told me everything I did and he still loved me. That's the way I read it. I don't know if that's true for you, but that's the way I read it. And when they came out to see him on what? On the testimony of the town woman that everybody knows, keeps sleeping around with different men, has nothing on her own. When her testimony ran into town to tell them, you got to come check this guy out who knew everything that I ever did. It says when they came out to see him in verse 40, they begged him to stay in their village. So he stayed for 2 days, long enough for many more to hear his message and believe. And then they said to the woman, now we believe, not just because of what you told us, but because we have heard him ourselves. Now we know that he is indeed the Savior of the world. But it started with the one woman's testimony. And what was her testimony? That guy called me out in everything. He knew everything about me. That guy was not going to let me get away, right? He kept talking to me. He kept saying, like, this is like what religion really is, right? He called me out my sin. He's like this prophet guy. And then as soon as he said, I am the Messiah, I just knew it. And now you got to come check him out. And this is incredibly freeing for us as a community who loves grace-centered worship. Because not once did she go and just share the gospel word for word with her town. What she shared was her testimony, her life. And then what did she say? She said, come and see. And then they came because something was up. Something was different. Something was out of the ordinary for this woman. And they came and they said, hey, we don't believe just because you told us, but now we've seen.